Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another establishment of Autodesk Virtual Academy. I think I meant to say installment there, but that's okay. This will be a good one regardless. The date is July 22nd, 2021, and we got quite a session here today. With us here today, we got Jason Courtemanche, application engineer extraordinaire. Jason, how you doing today?
Good, Adam. How are you?
Not too bad. Thanks for being on here today. We also have another extraordinary person, Phil Steiger, who's been on AVA before. How's it going, Phil?
Doing great. How are you, Adam?
Not too bad. Yeah, we got a lot of all-stars in this particular call here today. And I know this topic in particular is a bit of a bear of a topic for sure for a lot of people, but you guys got some of the best presenters in the office here today. And I know Jason in particular might be especially qualified to talk about replication since he himself is a replicated individual as an identical twin. Is that right, Jason?
That is correct.
Oh, fantastic. Dude, you guys are in for a treat, dude. This guy knows Vault and everything about being a twin. So we're going to be talking about Vault, multi-site options, so replication, obviously, and some other implications around that kind of architecture and stuff. So yeah, hang in there, or, I guess strap in, or you guys are in for a ride here. This is a Zoom meeting, a Zoom webinar in particular, so be on the lookout for some extra buttons you might not be used to in regular Zoom meetings. So there's going to be like a Q&A section where you could submit questions. There's going to be some poll questions that'll show up on screen that you guys could respond to. There's also a chat window if you guys need to chat us and message us or anything like that for more questions. It's also a raise hand button as well if you want to. Oh yeah, there you go, raise hand button. So some people have found the raise hand button already. That's perfect. And yeah, feel free to let us know if there's any issues, any problems, any feedback. We highly value feedback. So you'll be expecting a survey at the end of the session for any kind of ideas, because if you want us to cover more replication stuff, we could absolutely do it, but just let us know. And finally, let us know if there's any issues with audio quality or anything like that, and we'll do our best to accommodate accordingly. All right. All right, cool. Jason, what do you got for us today, man? I know I've personally asked you a lot of questions about multi-site and replication, both before your time at this job and then after your time at this job. But what are we talking about here today?
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about, just kind of get into what exactly is, multi-site. What things that we need to consider when we start thinking about how do we get, a Vault server into another office, and how do we connect them, and kind of think about some of the solutions and some of the options. Some of you have probably heard about, AVFS servers, or SQL replication or connected workgroup. And we're going to talk about the different solutions and the pros and cons, and really kind of help educate everyone so they can kind of start to think about, the options and how they can fit that to their environment and fit that to accommodate their needs and their engineers. And then we'll kind of do some Q&A. Feel free to ask questions in the chat along the way. If not, we can get to them at the end. So a little bit about myself, like I mentioned, my name is Jason Courtemanche. I'm one of the application engineers here at KETIV. I've previously worked at Autodesk and PTC doing technical support for PDM solutions. So you're in good hands. And so we'll just kind of start off with a poll just to kind of get an idea of where people are at with replication. Do you have more than one Vault server? Are people using AVFS servers, or better known as Autodesk Vault file servers, AVFS for short? I'm just kind of curious what kind of versions of Vault people are using. Have people moved to Vault 2022 with replication? And we'll be talking about the difference between in that move. We'll kind of go from there. We'll just kind of wait a few more minutes, give everyone a chance to fill out the poll. I'm kind of curious just to see the audience, where people are at, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, we got some votes coming in here, pulling at around 40% so far. And Jason, you guys are able to see the poll questions up on screen right now too, right?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, and these kind of questions just kind of give us an idea of, where people are at with replication, and just gives us a better idea of the interests.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I think it both seem to be a bit slow, but I think we could go ahead and cut it here at about 50% right now. I'm going to end polling and I'm going to share results. Everyone could check it out. So what do we got here? Do you have more than one Vault server? No. Majority 55%, at least two, at least three. Yes, four or more. Wow. What a breakdown. Okay. We have a good split of using Vault replication. Some people are doing full Vault, some AVFS. What version of Vault are using? 2020 is the majority over there. And what do we know about SQL for 14-day retention period? We're going to hopefully change that percentage up in the other direction. So
Definitely.
a bit about that, yeah. So, and then I know there's a lot of interesting changes with Vault 2022 SQL replication. Is that right, Jason?
Absolutely, yeah. We'll get into that. I'm excited.
Cool. All right, cool. Thanks for sharing that information, guys. And you guys are in for a treat. Yep. No choice for enough. Fair enough. Yeah, that's true. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Jason. Thank you.
Sure. So we're going to really kind of start to think about the questions that we should be asking ourselves when we start to think about when it's time to start expanding our Vault. You know, do you really need a Vault server in each office? You know, we're definitely going to cover the differences between an AVFS server and full SQL replication, and how do we choose between the two, and also kind of an easy path to try one out. And, you know, if it doesn't solve all your needs, you know, maybe, you know, you can always convert an AVFS server to full replication later. And then it really comes down to performance, and we'll get into the specifics a little bit later, but that's things to think about. You know, if, you know, since most of the people on the call only have one Vault, you know, if you have users working from home or you have remote office, you know, those users, the farther they get away from Vault, a little bit longer they're going to have to wait to download files. It's probably the first place that end users will see performance, especially if you're dealing with, you know, 1,000-part assemblies or more. The larger the assembly, the longer it takes to download those through VPN, stuff like that. And then, of course, if you're doing a lot of items or ECO work that requires, you know, a lot of changes to updating the metadata in Vault. And so these kinds of performance issues to think about when we're trying to decide when is it time to add another Vault, and how do we do that? And that's really what we're going to focus on. There's a few assumptions that I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, you know. So the Vault server, you know, product design management server, is really designed to be, you know, inside your company firewall. All these examples, you know, there's no open ports to the world. You can only access the Vault through, you know, your local network or VPN, things like that. It's also assumed that, you know, all Vault servers can resolve each other's host name, and that really helps with file replication, which we'll get more into that. We're not going to really talk about today about how to access files from outside the network, but if you want to look more into that, you know, shared views, project sync, and VPN connections are definitely 3 ways to do that. So kind of just make sure that we're all using the same terminology. You know, we have a Vault server. So a Vault server really has 4 components. You have the AWS console, which is the application. You have the SQL server, which holds all the metadata. You have IIS, which is a web browser, which all of the communication interacts with. So the AWS console connects to the SQL, or connects to the Vault server through IIS. The Vault client goes through IIS. So that's really kind of where all the data kind of flows through. And then, of course, the file store, which is where the checked-in data is stored on the remote server. So the real difference between a full Vault server and an AVFS server is that it has everything except SQL, and so it has its own application, it has its own IIS web browser, and it has its own local copy of the file store, which is super important for like we were talking about before about downloading performance. And so just to kind of give you guys an idea of the icons, because we're going to use some of these in some of the examples, and so we can tell, the folders, the file store, the worldwide is kind of like a representation of IIS, and then this silver thing, it's kind of representative of a database. And so this kind of gives us an idea about what these icons kind of represent in terms of, does the site have like an AVFS? It has the AVFS application. It has a local copy of the file store, but for the metadata, it doesn't have its own copy of SQL. And we'll get in more in depth about that a little bit, but these are kind of the icons that we'll be using. And most people are probably familiar with a Vault server having the SQL server and Vault on the same computer. It's just wanted to point out that they don't technically have to be on the same computer, but at this point, because of the size of servers today, there's really no benefit from separating the two, because now you're just managing two servers when you can be managing one. If the server is properly sized, it's very easy to keep them all on the same server, and that's definitely something I would recommend. But it's good to know that that option exists. So, we know that most people start off with one Vault, but eventually when you have, one remote user, they're connecting to the company internet through VPN, or you have a remote site. So, they're connected through point-to-point VPN. And that's usually where companies kind of start, one or two remote users. But as you get more users, or they're more active users, eventually they're going to want more performance. And so that's kind of reason why it's good to kind of think about an AVFS server, because the AVFS server moves the file store to the same office as the end users, which kind of really helps on the check-in, check-out performance. And then from there, as you need more performance in terms of reading and writing to a database, that's where we can start to think about SQL replication, because SQL replication gets us a copy of SQL in both locations. And for some people, it might make sense to move the Vault server into the cloud in terms of, it's still a full Vault server or Windows server. It's still this identical setup, but that's definitely one option. And we'll explore more on that in terms of having both remote people just connecting to the cloud if the internet's fast enough and the performance is what they need. So just the kind of the the advantages of having remote users connect through VPN is really it doesn't change. It doesn't make it any harder to manage. You're still only managing one Vault. Obviously, the disadvantages, those remote users are going to have some slowness compared to the users in the first office or in the same office as the Vault server. And that's really what kind of starts the conversation to start thinking about, well, what can we do? We don't want a user waiting a minute or two to download some files. That kind of slowness and impact to productivity really can start to really show. And so that's really the time to start thinking about how do we fix that issue. And the AVFS server is great because an AVFS server gets us a local copy of the entire file store on a server at the same office as the other CAD users. And this way, sure, you have to, it's one more server to manage, but the nice thing is that it allows you to alleviate the need from having to, when you're doing a get, now they can download the file straight from the local AVFS server if it has it. And then during the night, or depending on how it's set up, whether it's by night or every 4 hours, these two servers will sync the file store. And that way you can use the network during the nighttime when everyone's at home, and you can keep these two servers up to date. And then that way in the morning, when a user does a get or tries to check in their work, they're only having to communicate with the server in the same office. And so that really changes the performance. As some of you may know that have used an AVFS server, if you tried to download a file that hasn't been synced yet. So for instance, if a user in Office B checks a file in and someone in the first office, they'll see the file, and when they do a get on it, they'll just get a warning that says this file isn't replicated. Do you want to replicate it now? They click yes, and so it will basically, Vault will replicate on demand depending on what files the person needs. And so that's a really big benefit, so that two users on remote connections can share files, but they both of them have the same access in terms of, or the similar experience in terms of checking files in and out of Vault. The disadvantage with AVFS servers is because this remote site doesn't have a local copy of the SQL data, looking up or assigning files to items, or updating ECOs, engineering change orders, those kinds of operations will take a little bit longer because that information has to go and read the metadata in the database and then bring it back to the end user. But though that kind of interaction is quite small compared to the size of checking in and out large assembly data. And so that's why the AVF server is perfect for remote sites, because it alleviates at least the download, the check in, check out performance. And if over time you add more users and you want a local copy, we can always upgrade or convert a AVFS server to SQL replication. And then, the real advantage is that both users at both offices will have the same experience.
Then Jason, I know when we were discussing this originally, can you comment on how do a lot of our customers do AVFS in the first place, or the file store replication to begin with?
It really depends on their needs, because the real big difference is, by having another, by going to a full SQL replication, or, it's also referred to as Connected Workgroup, is that, it requires another SQL license. And so it really comes down to, larger companies that have volume licensing for SQL, it's very easy for them to go straight to SQL replication. For smaller customers that don't necessarily already have another SQL license, sometimes it's easier for them to do the AVFS first. And I think that for most people's needs, the AVFS server is a great way to start, because it's a great way to just try it out. And then if you need to, you can always convert it to full SQL replication later. And so it's nice to have that kind of flexibility.
Yeah, okay, that sounds really good. Yeah, so I mean, the file store replication is still a perfectly valid solution for a lot of users or a lot of companies already, huh?
Yeah, absolutely, because you got to think that's the largest place in terms of data. When you're updating metadata to the database, that's quite small compared to 100 megabytes or 500 megabyte assembly. Exactly.
Right. I see. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, because that's really where a lot of the time comes, and it really depends on. Some people have really fast internet at home. Their VPN connection to their office is quite quick, and they don't need an AVFS server. But eventually, as you add more users and more remote users, or at a site, or it makes sense for that second office, that's really where you kind of decide is when you have more users at that site. And then, that means you have more users downloading these large assemblies across the WAN from one office to the other. And the AVFS really helps mitigate that and allows the servers to sync the data at night. And that's the other thing that I think a lot of people forget about, is that when you set up full SQL replication, SQL is replicating the changes in the database between both sites, but it's also still doing file replication. And so it's, setting up SQL replication does both SQL replication and file replication, which is something that sometimes gets overlooked. And so I really want to just kind of highlight the differences between SQL replication. And so for some of you that know, the SQL replication for Vault 2021 and older is merge replication. And so the way that merge replication works is you have an ownership. So if I want to check out a file, this server would have to request ownership over it, and the ownership would be transferred to the subscriber. And then I'm able to do what I want, make my changes, and then when I release it, those changes to the local database get synced with the publisher, and then eventually get populated to any other subscribers. And so in merge replication, both Vault servers have to communicate with each other and maintain this 14-day retention period. And the reason why I bring this up is it's so important is that, if for some reason the internet was out for 14 days, that usually doesn't happen. But what usually happens is that if someone changes the password and for some reason these two SQL servers stop communicating and you get past the 14 days, there's no way to resync these servers. Once you get past the 14 days, you have to basically push everything, download what you can, and then basically push all of the data from the publisher back to the subscriber. And so that's something to be mindful of, that if you are running Vault with Vault 2021 or older, you're using merge replication. And so it's important to make sure that these two servers stay in communication, because if you pass the 14-day period, there's no way to undo it. And anything that's been checked in within the 14 days or past, there's a way to get some of it, but you lose that data. And so that's why I want to make sure everyone's aware of that. Whereas in Vault 2022, it's been changed to transactional replication. And the nice thing about this is that all rights, so it still does the same thing in terms of when you check a file in, the file gets saved to the local file store, just like an AVFS server. But the metadata, all of that gets written straight to the database on the publisher. And then as soon as it's written, then all of those changes get synced in one direction back to all of the subscribers. And this way you have no ownership, you're not waiting for ownership to be changed. And the nice thing about this is that there is no 14-day waiting period in terms of having SQL try to sync the data. And so this just really starts to make things a lot easier to maintain this kind of SQL environment. And kind of reduces some of the overhead it takes to maintain older Vault replications. So let's go in, and then, for some, offices, if the connection is fast enough, some offices choose to just move the Vault server into the cloud. And what I mean by in the cloud, it's still it's a virtual server. It's full version of Windows. You're still installing a full version of either SQL and installing the Vault server. And so this is another option in terms of a configuration as a way to grow if you don't want to manage SQL replication and having a fast enough connection where you don't need a local AVFS server. This is a way to expand Vault access, but without having to add a second server.
And Jason, as many people might not know, we do offer this as a service now for our customers, and we host their Vault server for them. We help them build the tunnel and set them up. And the customers we have operating on it right now have not noticed a difference at all than it being in their office. And it takes away the IT responsibility also.
Yeah, that's a great point, because you're right. That is something that I think is easy to forget about, is that, Vault is just like any other IT application. It's not something you just install and then leave it alone. It's something that, like for people who have seen my previous talk on the disaster recovery plan, making sure that Vault's configured the right way. And then also, making sure that Vault's set up so that it's being used to its fullest. And so this is just another great opportunity to consider when you're thinking about your Vault architecture and what is your needs and how many users. And if you want to manage it or have someone else manage it. And so these are kind of like the building blocks for two sites. Some companies have way more. needs than just 2 offices. And so it's nice to know that all of these things can be mixed and matched to suit your need, whether it's, Vault SQL replication, having one server in America, one server in Europe, and then AVFS servers for remote offices in other states. Whether it's, purely, it's just SQL replication at all the sites, and other configurations in terms of using remote SQL and a bunch of Vault servers with AVFS servers. And we'll get into some examples. So, and that's the beauty of Vault, is that, we're able to, set these things up and configure them and fit your needs. And these kinds of projects, sure take a little planning, but it's very doable to set up replication AVFS servers. These things don't take months, it take maybe a week, but planning, and that's what's, I think, a lot of people forget about, is that, we have, by using Vault, we have this fantastic feature that really allows us to grow Vault to fit our needs, and really kind of fine tune to what it is that we want, whether, it's, having 2 offices replicated, and then maybe we have a remote manufacturing site that just needs to view content. And so they're mostly downloading content. And so having an AVFS server so they have the local files and can just use the Vault client to view content is one option, so that you can have the kind of flexibility. And so the nice thing about replication is that, as your needs grow, you can add more and more offices, and just keep adding more subscribers. And then that way, and it doesn't matter if if your office is, a state away or a continent away, as long as the connection, the connection between those 2 offices are set up in a way, Vault really does really quite well in terms of allowing the servers to communicate, but not having, this way where you have like 14 users in Office V, all of them are interacting mostly with the local server. And then the Vault server has to, if you're missing a file, has to go and look at the other servers. But the nice thing is that by having a local server, really kind of just allows all the users to have the same experience, whether they're connecting to one in the cloud or the local one. It just gives you flexibility to grow and manage the connection. For some users that choose not to do SQL replication, and in the past, it's like you can also connect multiple Vault servers to the same remote SQL server. And then that way you can connect AVFS servers from all your remote offices to Vault. And this is really a setup where, you start out with, one Vault server and one remote server. And, once you add enough AVFS servers to one ADMS server, eventually, you would add another one, and you could really expand this to a large deployment, where this could be, 6 or 20 AVFS servers. It just depends on how many remote sites. But the nice thing is that all these components are scalable to really kind of fit your need. This is probably a common setup, having SQL replication for the different geos, and then within the geo have local remote AVFS servers. And then that way, everyone's getting the same experience. And if they need to later on, like let's say if you have, a lot of users in one remote site that are doing a lot of CAD work, you could always make that remote AVFS server and bring it part of SQL replication. And so that's the beauty about having this opportunity, is that you can grow these things as you need. You don't have to figure out from day one, I need 3 remote subscribers. You can always grow it as your business grows, as the amount of users at one location grows, and you really just kind of use the performance as an indicator of when is it time to add an AVFS server, when's it time to upgrade an AVFS server to full SQL replication. So kind of to summarize, so that the advantage of the AVFS servers, is that hourly or at night, all the AVFS servers will replicate all the files that have been checked in during the day. And that way, you're not putting a load on the network between two, or unnecessary load between two offices. You might as well use the internet connection at night when no one else is using it to sync all that data. The disadvantage of the AVFS server is that you don't have a local copy of SQL, so you have to wait for all the SQL requests to come across the WAN or the wide area network. And then for SQL replication, again, SQL replication to SQL replication and file replication. And the greatest advantage is that users at the same sites have the same experience in terms of their own copy of SQL, their own local copy of the file store. And I would argue that the biggest advantage, at least in terms of replication to upgrade to Vault 2022, is by changing the replication from merge replication to transactional replication completely changes the need to maintain the 14-day retention period. And it gets rid of file ownership, which can, for some people that have used that, if the internet goes down between the two sites, when it comes back up, it'll merge the information. The hard part is that if you have users working on one site and users working on the publisher, and they're not sharing data, sometimes if something happens to SQL replication, sometimes it can take a few weeks to notice it, because if you're not accessing someone else's files, it might not be as obvious that it's not doing not replicating the information. And so that's I think the major advantage is to make it easier to maintain SQL replication by going to transactional replication. As someone that has helped many customers rebuild replication after that 14-day period, it's a challenge that I do not wish on anyone. So if you're using currently replication, it's definitely worth thinking about as part of your disaster recovery plan of, how do you rebuild SQL and what are your steps? And it's good to think about that ahead of time, because the day that you have to execute that plan is not the day that you want to be making or figuring out how do you do it.
Yeah. I've been on a few of those calls with you as well. Yeah, it's always, when you ask them, how long has replication been down? And they're like, oh, it's been 21 days. Some bad news for everybody.
Right. Sometimes you get lucky, but.
We have a few questions here too, if you don't mind pausing here,
sure.
Jason. Brian Kelly, he's asking about Vault Pro Server 2022. Should I keep it to transactional rather than the merge that we used in Vault Pro 2021? Is that an option? Do you have to toggle the merge? Do you have to toggle the transactional replication over the regular merge? Is that right?
No, it's something that gets changed during the when you upgrade. When you upgrade from 2021 to 2022, you basically have to take down replication, and then when you upgrade, you have to re-enable it.
I see.
Because merge replication isn't an option in 2022.
I see. So it is going to be transactional by default in 2022, Brian. Yeah. And it sounds like you've had some replication issues in the past too. So hopefully that'll prevent that in the future as well. In a similar vein, someone was asking about the kind of typical length of time for AVFS replication. So I know you said that the file store stuff happens at night. Is there a general time frame for how long that stuff would normally take?
It usually takes, it really depends on the amount of files that have been checked in during the day, but it's, it basically does the same thing that you would be doing if you were checking in. It's just offloading it to nighttime. And so it's a very similar process in terms of the check-in process versus like file store replication. It's very similar. And time.
Bandwidth also between the sites.
I see.
Yeah, the internet connection probably plays the biggest role between how long that takes.
Mhm.
And I've never seen it take 2 hours. I see the 10 minutes, 2 hours. I was doing 28 sites and I was able to do them all. I had them scheduled a half hour apart and they were all being done within a half hour. We weren't changing that much data.
Right, exactly. So maybe not something you don't have to block out, 8 hours to make sure it replicates every night for that, I'm sure.
No, and I was even doing it during the day.
Oh yeah, right on.
Because if you're only replicating 3 or 4 files, you're never going to see any, bandwidth issues for anybody. Right. There's not a lot of changes going on during the day.
That's interesting. And then Brian did have a follow-up comment here. It'll set the transactional by default, but when I tried to force it back to merge, it blew up.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of a transition there that needs to happen. And we could possibly take that offline if you need help with that, Brian. But yeah, stay tuned. Okay. All right. I think that's all I got for the moment, guys. Go ahead, Jason. I think you have another slide of summary, I think.
Yeah, this slide and then just the call to action.
Oh, right on. Okay. Yeah. And so Phil, you had mentioned earlier, the whole, storing a vault in the cloud is definitely a solution to this kind of multi-site conversation already. And you described our service that we provide for the Vault as a service. Do you want to talk a bit more with the slide here?
Sure. So we have different levels of support here at KETIV. We do sell licensing. It's just basic, and then you get into KETIV support, whereas we help you with your desktop applications and issues and product training. But then we get more into people who are having who own Vault, and we do Vault support, and then we do tracking of your support. We do help you with your Vault configurations and your Vault admin. We also do quarterly maintenances on that. And we are working on a new tool, our Vault Analytics, that we're hoping to roll out here before the end of the year. That is a service that would sit on your Vault server and basically always be tracking the Vault and making sure that the Vault backup was running, making sure you're not low on disk space, or if there was any errors going on. It's more of a proactive service, and it would auto-generate an email to you and us if there was a problem, so that, hey, we could get on a call, fix your backup. If there was an error that we were seeing happening, because sometimes errors start to happen and you don't experience a problem for 3 or 4 days after that error started to generate. Well, if it happens once, let's get on a call, let's see why that error is happening. We can fix it. So that service is coming soon. And then, like we said, we do have Vault as a service. It's a cloud-hosted solution where we basically host your Vault in the cloud. And, Jason was showing a couple of those slides where he had multiple regions for replication. And, we're working with a couple of customers right now where we're looking at doing this full replication from America to Europe and to Asia for them. And then we're just basically creating VPN tunnels down to their offices in those locations for them to use the Vault. So, and we're doing all the work for them, managing their Vault, making sure the backup's done. We're keeping an eye on that, and they're just using Vault and taking advantage of all the features of Vault. I see we have a question. I'd like to go.
Yeah, and I think, and then I think the next slide here is Q&A, right, Jason?
Yep.
Yeah. So just to round things off, yeah. And so again, there's a lot of different ways to approach, how to manage all your different vaults, right? Especially this multi-site stuff. So definitely, that's the whole reason we have these presentations, because we know it is a complicated topic and a lot of solutions, including some services with us. And so if you guys have any questions, we'd love to take them at the moment. See here from,
especially since every customer, have different sites, different configurations, different needs.
it's always unique, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Right on. Yeah. So yeah, feel free to submit any questions you guys might have over here. And yeah, I agree, Brian. Yeah. Yeah, the whole cloud talk has been, I feel like it's kind of been a big topic for a long time. And it's kind of coming to fruition, it seems like more recently, where it's a lot more accessible to just get stuff up in the cloud and start coordinating over shared networks like that for sure. I didn't realize you used to be with us in the past too. Right on.
And when you really look at the cost of
Yeah.
either you putting it on site and managing it or hosting it in the cloud, the ROI is, pretty big for hosting it in the cloud now. I mean, because you eliminate IT work and all sorts of other stuff that you're no longer having to do by us hosting it.
I know. Okay. And so I don't know if we have any other questions here then, guys. Yeah, I'll keep it open for a little bit longer here, but I guess any closing comments? I always thought replication was kind of hard to wrap my mind around, honestly. And I like the way that you framed it around kind of user experience, right? Because it's ultimately about, can you get to the stuff that you need in an effective manner, right? Whether it's just checking out files for like local looking ats and just checking out, or if you need to actually update items and do a bunch of other stuff, and then you go into full replication and stuff. So yeah, I guess any other comments you think on this, or any last words?
Yeah, it's just, I really like that Vault is set up in a way that you can expand it, you can grow it to fit your need, and, whereas, it's very, very approachable,
Yeah, the tools are already there. Yeah,
exactly.
There. Yeah,
which is super nice to be able to roll that out and, spend, a short amount of time. And whereas, if it was more complicated, you wouldn't do it, but it's set up in a way, you're right, it's already integrated. It's makes it very easy to roll it out as you need it. And it's nice because even, when you're inside the Vault client, there's fields that will show you if the file has been locally replicated or not. And so there's little things like that once you start using an AVFS server or SQL replication, there's little things like that to look out for, so that you know that you're downloading something that you already have it local.
Can I add? I would like to add something to the whole replication conversation.
Sure.
I mean, if you're thinking about going to replication, I say you start out with AVFS. I really do. Don't go full SQL, because it's easy to upgrade to full SQL if you need that full replication. Just in my experience, most of the offices that I supported didn't need the full SQL, and it ran just fine. But it's a cheaper, easier option to stand up, and it's quick than to do full replication.
Well, and you don't have to buy that other SQL license, which is going to be a big.
I see a question came in about partial Vault replication. Yes, you can do partial Vault replication if you have different vaults set up inside a Vault, different containers. So if you have business unit A and business unit B set up inside your Vault, you could replicate just business unit B to another office and not business unit A. And in the scenario where I used to work, we had 13 different engineering groups, and we were replicating those to different sites all over the country. Yeah, Brian says AVS is so much easier, 10 minutes tops.
Yeah, that goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Could the cloud option be available in Asia? Yes. I'm working with a company right now that's looking to do US, Europe, Asia, and South America, and have it all replicated.
What is the cost of moving to the cloud?
It varies depending on your size of your vault. It starts around our basic, if you have a small vault, is around between 9,000 and 9,500 a year.
Yeah, and if you guys are curious about any more of, especially pricing information and stuff, I highly recommend you reach out to us after the session as well. We could definitely provide more information on any of that for sure. Yeah. And
great questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I know this is a pretty involved topic, and it definitely depends on your individual company. So feel free to reach out if you guys do have any questions. We're happy to discuss any of these topics at length here. I think we are going to cut it here though, unless there's any other last minute questions that want to come in here. Going once, going twice. All right, cool. Yeah, thanks for being on, Jason. Phil, you guys are always great to be on here, and I'm glad we have some fantastic Vault expertise. And yeah, thank you for being on here, the audience as well. Stay tuned next week. We'll have more information next time as well. So take care, and I'll see you guys next week. Thank you too, Brian. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.